My name is Marissa Ferguson, and I'm going to be discussing the Sheehan, Van Riet, and Bloom 2012 study measuring preschoolers' superstitious behavior. Individuals often make inferences about causal relationships, which can be purely coincidental. We call these responses motivated by this phenomenon superstitious behavior. Consider, for example, blowing on dice before rolling them to get ahead in a game, or wearing your pajamas inside out when you hear that snow is coming so that you might get a snow day off from school. If you engage in these behaviors enough times and the desired outcome happens to follow, you might start to believe your behavior had some sort of effect on the outcome. To consider some of the early experimental research on superstitious behavior, Skinner and Morse looked at superstitious behavior of pigeons in 1957. They demonstrated how pigeons' rate of pecking changed in the presence of a blue light, a sensory stimulus. Despite the pecking behavior being reinforced randomly once every 30 minutes, unrelated to the presentation of a blue light, the pigeon's own observation of their relationship of the pecking being reinforced with the presentation of the blue light produced a change in their behavior. Much like pigeons, undergraduate college students demonstrated similar superstitious behavior in a study done by Ono in 1957 in which lever pulling was reinforced with points. During the trials, colored lights were flashed and had no bearing on the points delivered. However, the participants altered their responses in accordance with the flashing lights, another demonstration of sensory stimulus control of superstitious behavior. So, after looking at animals and adults, what can be said for the superstitious behavior of young children? Wagner and Morris in 1987 set up an experiment in which marbles came out of a toy clown's mouth on a fixed interval schedule, totally independent of what responses the children present engaged in or did not engage in. The children began to engage in idiosyncratic behaviors like thumb sucking or touching the clown's nose at the end of the interval when the marbles would appear. Wagner and Morris were thus able to demonstrate, though with a very small sample, that children also engage in superstitious behavior. The purpose of the present investigation was to develop and validate a method of measuring children's sensory superstitious behaviors using a learning paradigm. Let's get into the method. The participants for the study included 24 typically developing English-speaking children between the ages of 3 and 5. The participants earned stickers as their reinforcers during the experiment. The sensory superstitious paradigm was created on a laptop using SuperLab stimulus presentation software and presented to the participants on a Mimo touchscreen measuring 23 centimeters by 14.5 centimeters by 2.5 centimeters, which looks like this. Let's take a look at how Sheehan and his colleagues conducted the procedure. The participants were given the instructions to tap a touchscreen in order to make a smiley face appear on the screen. During initial training, 3 taps to the screen caused a smiley face to appear. Once this response of 3 taps in a row was strengthened, the experimenters informed the participants that sometimes more taps were required, and during this training, 5 taps produced a smiley face. During the experiment, a smiley face appeared on the screen an average of every 15 seconds following the tapping of the participants' fingers. When the smiley face appeared, the experimenters also provided the participants with stickers and verbal praise. On 8 out of 16 trials, a butterfly also appeared on the screen for a duration of 10 seconds, independent of any tapping. The butterfly was the superstitious sensory stimulus in the experiment. The authors commented that the gender of the participants had no bearing on their responses, which is to say that superstitious behavior and gender are not correlated based on the results of the study, although that's incidental to all of the other information, but I found it interesting. The authors hypothesized that children would engage in higher rates of tapping behavior when the butterfly, the sensory stimulus, was on the screen based on an association made between the appearance of the butterfly and of the smiley face. They analyzed this in 2 ways using the following measurement system. 1. The total number of taps of the participants emitted while the butterfly was visible divided by the total number of seconds the butterfly was visible. And 2. by dividing the number of taps the participants emitted while the screen was blank divided by the total number of seconds the screen was blank. Results showed that indeed the participants would engage in higher rates of tapping in the presence of a butterfly than in the absence of the butterfly, indicating that although unrelated, the presence of the butterfly served as a discriminative stimulus for tapping in order to produce the presence of a smiley face. So we've identified that tapping emerged as a superstitious behavior and that the superstitious behavior can be elicited, in this case, with a stimulus cue using the very handy method of measurement identified in this slide. In order to strengthen the validity of their results, the authors replicated their study with some modifications. The procedure itself was identical to the initial procedure. However, this time there were 18 child participants, also the ages 3 to 5, as in the original group. The researchers used a laptop instead of a touchscreen, and the tapping behavior was thus substituted for mouse clicking behavior. Additionally, 14 test trials were conducted, 7 of which contained the butterfly stimulus. The software used, called ePrime, allowed for simultaneous presentation of both the smiley face and the butterfly. The results showed that, as in the first study, the rate of clicking in the presence of the butterfly was greater than the rate of clicking in the absence of the butterfly, thus again proving the emergence and elicitation of superstitious behavior when using sensory stimulus cues. Let's discuss. Here's why this is great. Not only are we able to observe that young children form associations based on observations of connections between two stimuli which alter their behavior, the emergence of superstitious behavior, but we know that this behavior can be elicited with sensory stimulus cues. The reason that this is such an improvement on previous research, however, is that the presentation of the measurement system is, the use of the measurement system that Sheehan and his colleagues developed allowed for precise measurement and quantification, whereas previous research relies on observations of behavior as far as patterns, idiosyncrasies, and repetition. Not to mention, the procedure itself was very easy to implement, allowing for replication. And so, with a study that's easy to replicate and a measurement system that is reliable, we have an excellent basis for studying superstitious behavior. All in all, it's very interesting to learn that humans become susceptible to superstitious tendencies at an early age. However, we are still left with plenty of questions, such as do superstitious behaviors become superstitious beliefs? And do children who show more superstitious behavior tend to have inaccurate causal knowledge? And under what conditions might that happen? When will superstitious tendencies lead to incorrect beliefs or knowledge acquisition? Thank you so much for listening to my presentation. The article is attached, and there are also some questions for you all to answer in the discussion post. Thank you.